welcome to Stand Up, Speak Out UK. Well, we've been gone a few weeks now, but let me go over what we are standing for. We're looking at homelessness, housing, and the benefit system, and politics come into it. But we're going to cover many things because I've made it in a way that I can bring a guest on everything. So welcome to what I call the guest program. Today, I'm Mr. Neil Salmons. I've known a bit of time myself. He's going to talk about PIP. I'm going to let him explain to you what PIP is and let him come on. Thank you very much for coming, Neil.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Ian.
And why don't you tell us what PIP is, first of all?
PIP is it's a benefit. It's the personal independence payment, and it is an additional payment on top of things like JSA and universal credit that's awarded to people once they've been assessed to see whether or not they qualify due to mental or physical health issues. I've known various people, as you know, we used to live with people who were on it and trying to claim it. Some of them found it a bit of a struggle. I had quite an easy ride compared to what I expected, but it was a bit of an interesting story with the way that I got mine. And mine is based around mental health for stress and anxiety, which I didn't really expect to get. But I think the rules to do with the assessments are changing to be more favourable to people with mental health, but don't quote me on that.
Well, first I should say we didn't live in the same room. We had what we call flats in a house.
Yeah,
I wasn't living with Neil.
No.
What anybody thinks about throwing in the papers about this. But I do remember we discussed this when you were applying. So why don't you tell us about your journey into applying for PIP?
Well, the problem that I had with applying for PIP, the main reason that I did it is I found that obviously we're all experiencing problems with the cost of living. And I found that it reached the point because of my mental health conditions at the moment. I've been out of work for a few years. I do like to work. I'm very happy at work. I thought I was very good at the job I was in, but I lost it due to circumstances which I won't go into. And basically, I was finding that with the rising cost of living, I just wasn't surviving to the end of the month on the universal credit that I was receiving. By the time I paid my bills and got food, basically I was running out of cash about 3 weeks into the month and borrowing money from people, which I obviously wasn't happy doing. It was causing me a lot of stress and worry about money, sleepless nights, and none of that. You know, all those factors were actually making my mental health worse. So I applied for PIP. Originally, I applied for it in March this year, March 2023. I did it via their helpline, which is different from the main universal credit line. I was assessed on the phone for about 20 minutes, just sort of yes and no questions. And they told me I will be sending you out a form at some point within the next 10 days to complete. And then you will have 3 weeks to send it back to us. If you don't get it back to us within 3 weeks, then you will need to apply again because your application will expire. So basically, that was the end of March. I waited the best part of 2 weeks before the form arrived. And when it arrived, it had a deadline on it. And the deadline was just over a week later. So although they told me I had 3 weeks, I didn't. I had about 8 days. I wouldn't consider myself an expert on benefits, and I wanted to make sure I did it right. And in actual fact, if I recall, you also gave me some counsel and said it might be an idea to have a word with someone who knows a little bit more about it, because my understanding, like a lot of people's, is that PIP, it's a very, very hard benefit to get. And I know people that have been on it, and basically they have found it, you know, the rules that come out of it in terms of what you're physically able to do and how it affects your life. It can sometimes get a little crazy. Let's put it like that. For instance, with if you say you've got back problems or you have problems with mobility, one of the questions I understand they ask you is, are you able to use an oven? And it's all about, you know, how far you have to reach up to get the food out of the oven, get it on the counter, and you can be marked down on the point system because of that. So I decided to I did two things. I didn't have time to get a letter from my doctor basically telling them that, you know, I've got mental health issues. I didn't have time to get a prescription prescription history. And I also wanted to speak to one of my local advice centres, which was at Toynbee Hall in Aldgate. So I thought, no, I'm going to scrap this. I'm going to get all the evidence together, speak to the experts, and then I'll apply again.
Do you remember, Neil,
yep.
when we were talking about this, that I will say one thing, you were telling me at times, you don't mind me sharing with our audience, is that you found it difficult to go to to make the call about your universal credit.
Yeah, I found it stressful.
And that was one of the stresses you were suffering from.
Yes.
I can understand. But why don't go on to I was surprised when you told me what happened when you received the telephone assessment after you'd seen Toynbee and you're preparing your evidence, you got an appointment for the assessment. Yeah,
basically what happened, I went to Toynbee Hall, as I say, my original application was in March. I applied for an appointment at Toynbee Hall towards the end of April, when at that time, as far as I was concerned, my application was past the deadline and expired. I went to Toynbee Hall in the beginning of May to get professional advice, and I had a very good advisor there, and she basically made the phone call to the same helpline I'd called. And when they put my name in, they found out that even though nearly 2 months had gone by, my application was still open, which actually made things easier because it meant that we could go with the original form. I'd already drafted out on a copy of the form what my answers were going to be. We were going to go through them and just make sure that that I didn't trip myself up anywhere. And so we just carried on. So my counsellor was going on leave for a week. By the time I got the new appointment, it meant going back at the beginning of June. So it was 2 weeks after the initial appointment. 2 days before I was due to attend Toynbee Hall, I received a letter from an organisation calling itself Independent Assessment Services. And these people, I'll come back to who they really are later on, if I may. These people basically told me that I had an appointment on the Friday, 2 days after I went back to Toynbee Hall. And I phoned them up and said, well, look, how can I have an appointment? I've not been assessed. I've got no evidence. I've sent you no evidence. And that was when I found out, as confirmed by other people that we know, that the initial telephone call and the half a dozen questions that they ask you when you phone up to apply for PIP, that is classed as the start of your qualification period, and you're also assessed on that. The people told me on 2 occasions in 2 separate phone calls at the advice centre that I didn't need to get evidence and send it through to them because they'd already made a decision based on my original application, and the interview that I had on the telephone in a couple of days' time would actually determine whether or not I got PIP or not. I decided I wasn't happy with that. And number one, I wanted to continue with the advice from Toynbee Hall. So I went to the meeting. I also got letters from my doctor and a copy of my log. And I sent the stuff off anyway, because I thought this is a waste of everybody's time. And I just want to be sure that this is actually going to get me what I'm looking to get. When I went back to Toynbee Hall and spoke to my advisor, I had to tell her 3 times that I had the interview because she didn't believe it. She said, I've never had anybody come in here who has been given an appointment for PIP for a telephone assessment and they haven't sent them any evidence.
At what period, Neil? I'm going to move around a bit.
Okay.
What period would you say is from when you actually sent it to the interview, to the telephone interview? Well, how long was it between?
I went to Toynbee Hall on the Tuesday. I
Okay.
had the interview on the Friday morning.
And
Before
when did
the
you, sorry, when did you send the evidence off? That's what I'm saying.
this is it. I held on to the evidence
Ah,
until I'd been to Toynbee, and then I had the interview at Toynbee. We went through the form, we collected and copied all the evidence that I needed. I put it all in the envelope. On the following Friday, 3 days later, I went through the telephone assessment with these guys at ISA or IAS, whatever. They told me, okay, we'll come back to you. And then I put the letter and the evidence in the mail that day.
and how long afterwards did you get your letter saying you got it?
It was about 2 weeks.
Maybe. Now, what I'm thinking of is, as we spoke about this before, how can I assess you without looking at your evidence to make the right questions?
Mm. My understanding, I mean, I've got friends who have been through PIP and have had a much rougher ride than I had. And they basically tell me that the assessment is basically constant in that if you, unlike me, having a chat with them, and I'll add something to that in a moment as well. If you're doing a virtual chat, a Zoom chat, or a telephone chat with them, if they actually call you in for an appointment, which most people get called in for a physical assessment, the staff at the medical centre are told this person, let's for example say this person is saying that they want to claim PIP for back problems, spinal injuries, something like that. Those people are told to keep an eye on how you sit and how you walk around and how you behave when you're actually in the foyer. And they then send the notes through to the guys who actually do the assessment. So you're assessed from the minute you walk in the door, but not everybody knows that. And also, a lot of these people, has also been confirmed by mutual friends and colleagues of ours, is that these people are not always qualified in the field that they're being asked to interview the person who's applying.
Yeah,
My guy was a chiropractor, I think, if I remember rightly.
yeah, I was going to mention that I used to do some work with a theatre company doing these sort of stories, and that particular year, one of the story was about PIP, and it was at a hostel in Camden, and this woman stood up and she said, "When I went for my assessment, I was seen by a physiotherapist. I have mental health problems. How can I know about that?"
Yeah,
Please go on.
I know someone who actually refused to go through with the interview because she said, you're not qualified to assess me. You don't know anything about my mental health, and I'm not going to be interviewed by you. You go and find someone to assess me who's actually qualified in the field. And in that occasion, they did, but I don't know how many people are actually in that position.
I don't think many people are aware of it. Actually, the other day, okay, I'm retired now, so I'm not looking for work. Unless because somebody wants to pay me £1 million, I'm always willing to take that.
I'll split it with you.
I actually saw a job advert for an assessor for PIP.
Right.
Very nice. But they did say they wanted somebody from the National Health Service, a nurse from
Yeah.
the National Health Service. 38 grand. But I suspect, as you said, and we do know somebody. I know one of the guys at the place we lived before you came. He went for his PIP assessment, and he was on morphine, couldn't walk. They said, "How far can you walk?" And another guy who we both know, Shammy, I'll mention his name, nobody will know who he is. He got someone to drive him to the mental health, to the assessment centre, because it's never near where you are. It's always across London or across far away. And they asked him, "How did you get here?" And he told them he got a lift. It is about that sort of thing. But please go on then.
The thing, just on a quick note for that, before I move on, the thing that I found interesting is somebody else that we know in that building, Ray. Once again, nobody will know who he is. I remember the struggles that he had for the best part of 6 months, just trying to get together and send back the evidence for his PIP, and he was already on it,
Mm.
and the evidence they wanted. So I don't understand why, if you're already on it, you've got to go through this on this merry-go-round of trying to give them evidence. And he must have sent it on about 3 times, and yet they didn't ask me for any at all. That makes no sense at all to me.
That did surprise me when you told me you got it. Because
Mm,
even we were saying it's 2 weeks after you sent the evidence off. And if I remember correctly, you said to me after the telephone interview, you said the interview said he'd be making notes about this.
yeah,
That's
he
it,
did.
which is
Yeah,
good, I think. I don't think everybody does.
no.
And I think that we don't realise. I must admit, one thing I didn't look into, which I'm ashamed of, and maybe one of my listeners might know the answers to this, and please email me if you have, is can you take an advocate with you if you have a face-to-face assessment?
Yeah, I'm
Opinion.
not entirely sure. It's I think they can go, but I don't think they're allowed to speak on your behalf. But I might be wrong about that.
Yeah,
Once
because
again,
I
as you
know
say, maybe someone else can let us know.
with the DWP and the benefits you are. My friend actually, I do know part of the answer. One of my friends, who we know, who you don't know, who you know, basically runs a credit writing. She's had to go to tribunals about her PIP,
Mm.
and she finally found somebody who can help her. But I don't think it's so widely known about the advocacy side. But
No, no,
carry
I
on, Neil.
must admit I don't really know.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
other interesting thing that I found was that during this interview, the gentleman let slip that this independence assessment services are actually part of Atos. And I used to work for the health service, as you know, and they had an awful lot of problems with Atos. And I was of the impression that they'd had their contract revoked, but seemingly not.
yeah. You actually mentioned to me. I was shocked. I said Atos actually has in several councils before Neil's assessment have had their contract taken away, and recently, I think it's in Manchester area, they've had another one withdraw their contract, and somebody else was going to take it over.
I did see that. Yeah, yeah.
It's the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, it's these organisations. Okay, they earn a nice chunk of change to do these assessments. It is unfortunately a business. And I personally feel, and maybe you might disagree, Neil, is they're set up to fail people, not to
That's
pass.
the impression I've always been given. Yeah,
Yeah. And you were so lucky. I was so surprised.
I think, and to be honest, it makes such a big difference to me as well because it basically doubles my income. And don't get me wrong, I'm not the sort of person who goes out paints the town red every night. I do like a beer, and I find that socialising helps my state of mind and my mental health. But if I can't afford to do something, I won't do it. Simple as that. But in terms of just paying bills and being able to survive to the end of the month, anything else aside, it's made a huge difference to me, and it's taken a lot of weight off my mind. But I'm
Yeah.
still very surprised that I managed to get it so easily.
Yeah, I know you've given up the caviar because of it. But
Yeah, I've gone back to one night a week on the champagne, to be honest with you.
yeah, I think let me ask you a question about this. Now you've been through the process, that's what you've explained it beautifully.
Thank you.
Would you say there's an easier way?
I'm sure there is, but firstly, I would say that it probably have to go through God knows how many commissions and parliamentary votes to actually get it in if there is. I wouldn't say necessarily easier, based on my experience, I think there needs to be some kind of consistency, because I found that, as I said earlier, that with people that we know jumping through so many hoops and sending information in triplicate, and me not being asked for any, I wonder how widespread that is, because that doesn't seem to be, maybe it's wrong to use the word unfair, but you have to wonder why some people are asked for evidence and other people are assessed based on the original call. Is it down to the person who actually does the interviewing? Although the person who interviewed me, as you said, he said he's going to be passing his notes on. The people who do the interviewing don't actually make the final call. If they pass it on to a third party and they make the final call. So I don't know. There seems to be an awful lot of inconsistencies right across the benefit system, but especially with anything related to health. And I think that needs to be tightened up.
Maybe, you said that. We were spoken a lot about your assessment over the weeks of it. Some sort of, you said a uniform approach.
Mm.
But once again, let's look at the timeline you had. In March, you applied. You were given a deadline in 3 weeks' time, and most people assume 3 weeks' time from when they sent the letter out. No, it was really, I think it's 3 weeks' time from that date when you applied.
Yeah, I believe it was now. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't at the time.
You got the letter 2 weeks later. It's not unusual from the DWP. A friend of mine I got him to ask why his pension was less. And it took him 2 months to reply. You've had a similar experience to the DWP. So it's not unusual. But it would be logical, first of all, it should be done, say, 3 weeks' time. You can't say when you received the letter.
No.
But in theory, even if it's sent second class, which most of these letters are, they give some sort of leeway. But then to discover your claim was always open, even after you were informed it would be closed down that period, there has to be some better way, in my opinion. I'm not sure what. I think, personally, I'd put PIP online. What do you think of that?
That would make sense, and it would. I mean, okay, we all know people who are not. Some people are more IT literate than others, and we've been with people who are absolutely terrified. I've got friends who are absolutely terrified of using technology, even in 2023. But yeah, for most people, it would speed the process up at the very least.
But also there'd be this. You never told me about the 3 weeks bit. All right, and I'm shocked about it.
Yeah,
because to me, it's like I'm looking at the appointments for the podcast. I have to make sure, I've got certain people in mind. I've got to get them in on a certain date. Yeah, and it's about appointments. And we're talking about the government, which aren't that good at appointments, in my opinion. I'm talking about the government as a whole. That we've got to help people because it is difficult. I know another person I mentioned to you about her. I've known her for several years. I was what they call the members rep coordinator, and my job was mainly a lot of advocacy came to my job to advocate for other members. And there was one member, every time a PIP assessment came in, and I said she'd never lost it, but she goes to panic mode. I'm going to lose my home.
Yeah. And I'm sure she's not alone. A lot of people would do that.
And there must be a way, but I'm not sure what. What surprised me also later on was about Atos coming into it.
Yeah.
The guy you were supposed to be, your interview was by another organisation, supposed to be.
Yeah.
But as we discussed,
they are part of Atos, even though it's not advertised.
it's quite easy. I had one theory, ladies and gentlemen. There are a couple of organisations in this country who do these PIP assessments. I wouldn't be surprised, and this is my suspicions. There's no proof to it. I haven't bothered looking up. I should do. Is that somehow I'm going to find the same bloke at the top of the ladder who's earning a chunk of change out of this? Because it is. And PIP really is supposed to help people, but it puts people through mental anxiety.
Yeah.
Did you feel any mental anxiety during the process?
I would say probably during the initial phone call. Once I got Toynbee Hall involved and the advisors at the advice centre there, it kind of took the stress out of it, because I was concerned it wasn't so much that I might put down something that wasn't relevant. It was that they might sort of trick me on something by some of the answers that I'd given. I'll give you an example of what I mean. During the actual interview with this guy, and I found this an interesting one of the questions they asked me about my mental health was, do I sometimes forget to take my medication? And I answered yes. And the guy said, well, okay, well, I'm going to have to make a note of that, because if you're forgetting to take your medication, then if you're not reaching the correct dose and you're not taking it regularly enough, that might be the reason why you've got mental health problems. And that is straight away, I thought, I've blown it. I shouldn't have said that. But I wasn't lying. It was a fact. And I'm sure I'm not alone, that the people all over the country, all over the world who suffer as I do, there will be times when they will accidentally drop their medication. But I really thought that I'd screwed the whole thing and he was going to mark me down on that. But that wasn't the case.
I know, as you know, I'm terrible with my medication. I've got so many tablets I've got to take during the day, and some weeks I go, I'm not taking any.
Yeah.
So it isn't unusual to forget, or in my case, I got a mental blockage about taking medication.
I think some people have. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have you any final words about PIP that you might want to share with our listeners?
All I would say is, I'll come back to what I said earlier. Even though it's not a perfect system, and even though they keep saying they're going to, you keep reading online and in the newspapers that they're going to put it through the government and get it revamped and to make it easier, I don't think it's as hard to apply as it used to be, based on what I hear and on my experience. But it's, as I said, it's still not perfect. But if people are anxious about applying for it and they are struggling and they're entitled to it, then I would say get advice, get help to make sure that you get the best result you can. But it's certainly worth applying for, because for me it's been a godsend to have a little bit of extra cash coming in.
Thank you very much for coming, Neil. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have, maybe you want to pass questions to Neil, you can do it through me. It's Ian Kalman, IANKALMAN at GMX, GeorgeMichaelXray.com. Make comments about this. Maybe you want to come and talk about your experience. A lot of my guests over the weeks you've heard so far are all from lived experience. They're not making stories up. I'm going to say this is not Benefit Street. If everybody remembers that program they did about a street in, I can't remember where it was, everybody was on benefits and all they looked at the dregs of society. People do want to contribute. Neil, for example, well, through me it is, he's on a couple of panels talking to the DWP and the government about things. There are many amazing people out there, and this podcast is for them to talk, or do I have other people come on? So thank you very much, and have a good week.